Can someone please disconnect Kemi Badenoch's internet router so that she cannot watch any more programming on the gruesome GB News channel? After a reasonable performance at last week's PMQs, during which the Conservative leader aligned herself with a public sector pay rise for teachers, it was back to bandwagon Badenoch. The Tory leader is increasingly the hostage of reform and its agents within her own Conservative party. So, it came as little surprise that she was eager to offer her views on the case of the assassin Axel Rudakubana. Last July, aged just 17 years old, the teenager murdered 3 children and attacked 8 others with a knife at a Southport dance class. He is now in prison for the next 52 years for his awful crimes, and it is unlikely that the killer will ever be released. The government has announced a public inquiry to review the response of institutions to Rudakubana before he turned to murder, but this isn't enough for the hard right, who see a political advantage in accusing the government of a cover-up. Well, of course. The Rudakubana conspiracy now joins the Great Replacement and COVID-19 as another stupid right-wing internet anthem. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer stands accused of dishonesty. It was his duty to let the British public know that Rudakubana possessed terrorist manuals as soon as they were discovered. Furthermore, why didn't the authorities reveal that the deranged killer had also manufactured ricin? Surely, the public had a right to know. In the age of social media, the government cannot any longer hide behind contempt of court legal niceties. It should have opted for full disclosure at the earliest opportunity. This is the sort of nonsense that is repeated as truth on rolling news channels like GB News and other hard-right outlets. It is proof once again that the rule of law applies to the right only when criminality does not offer a distinct political advantage. The government was aware of the scale of public revulsion in the aftermath of the murders. The alleged killer was in custody, and the legal advice ministers received was such that a successful prosecution should be protected at all costs. This was surely in the interests of the grieving families too. The fact that Rudakubana's trial was able to go ahead just 5 months after the murders, and without any defense complaints that the procedure had been prejudiced, shows the wisdom of such counsel. Yes, as the Sun newspaper reports, Rudakubana had a library of jihadi manuals on his personal computers. The newspaper also confirmed that the teen killer refined his taste for murder by studying the exploits of Nazi Germany, the internecine killers of Rwanda, and terrorist groups like the Irish Republican Army. This turns to dust the hard right's first talking point about Rudakubana being part of an Islamist threat to Britain. But again, this is not a time for truth and facts, but raw emotion that can be channeled into hate. By the way, the Sun should be condemned for its bonkers decision to publish the names of death cult manuals that can be downloaded from the internet. The UK riots of last August may have been sparked by the murders, but they quickly became a pogrom against asylum seekers in particular and Britain's black and brown people in general. These riots spread to town and city, even though it was well known that the alleged perpetrator had been caught and was a British teenager. The media commentators, political hustlers, and parliamentarians, who parade their righteous indignation on social media, know these facts well enough. They also recognize that this is no time for calm and reason when the Labour government is under pressure. Nigel Farage is riding high in the polls and the Tory party looks to be drifting. And so they continue, flicking their lighted matches at the petrol that has been thrown on Britain's race relations over the past 2 decades. And when the fire rages out of control, they then look sternly into the camera, sharing their yes buts and equivocations, as they watch in real time some of their own viewers pelting police officers with missiles for daring to stop them burning down the hotels that accommodate women and children born in foreign lands, who thought they'd reached safety in the United Kingdom. Kemi Badenoch should run screaming in the opposite direction from any association with these purveyors of political snake oil. But intoxicated by the scent of short-term popularity and traumatized by unimpressive poll ratings, Kemi feels trapped and joins the stampede. The North West Essex MP was a guest of Telegraph hack Camilla Tominey, who was moonlighting on GB News, and offered the view that immigration was at the root of the Southport slayings. Well, yes, if you have a basic grasp of geography and human biology and understand that the killer's parents emigrated to Britain from Rwanda, and then procreated in Wales, so that Axel Rudakubana could be born a citizen of Great Britain. Badenoch was right to say that institutional failures allowed Rudakubana to slip through the net, even though the scale of the surveillance that would have been required to keep this obsessive murderer away from his life's interest would have been beyond the resources of local authorities. But what Badenoch wanted to do was schmooze with reform voters, and so her round of Sunday interviews were little more than a dismal recitation of the kind of piffle served up 24 hours a day on GB News and Talk TV. She should have recognized the murders as a symptom of Britain's moral decline. She would have earned many brownie points for calling out the violence and depravity on television and social media. Badenoch might have connected with more reasonable viewers, as both thoughtful and sincere, if she had chosen to express the fear that the Southport killings were evidence of a slide towards American-style, teenage mass shootings. Instead, Badenoch talked about the dangers of an information vacuum. This is to argue for government by social media, a simply terrifying and indefensible position for a sworn member of His Majesty's Parliament. But Badenoch is focused on the immediate, and her remarks in her Sunday morning interview with Tominey and in later media chats were designed to play well on social media and in the next day's newspapers. In claiming that Rudakubana's actions were the work of a teenager who didn't love Britain, Badenoch made a point that was as abysmal as it was irrelevant. With a public inquiry announced, the focus should be on how and why someone so young became so deranged and what can be done to stop the violent inclinations of young people. But Badenoch had other priorities. In the wake of the Southport murders, there was a need for a broader conversation about integration, she opined. On BBC television, Badenoch doubled down on this point. There are a lot of people like Rudakubana who, despite being here from childhood or born here, are not integrating into the rest of society. They hate their country. It needs to be repeated again and again that Rudakubana is British. He was born and raised in Wales. His crimes were informed by the internet but made in Britain. Racializing the Southport murders may satisfy those who need to believe the worst about black people, and are encouraged so to do, by disgraceful political operatives working in cahoots with the despicable media. But it doesn't take a British crime expert to dismantle this kind of idiocy. Did the Dunblane massacre or the Soham child murders lead political leaders to make sweeping assertions about the loyalty of white men to the realm, or the threat they pose to their neighbors? No. Did the 1966 jailing of the Moors murderer Myra Hindley force indoors young white women with peroxide blonde hair, fearful that they too would be attacked by a baying mob? No. Did 30 years of IRA attacks on the British mainland lead to a public discussion about the dangers of Catholicism? No. Does the knowledge that child-abusing priests are operating inside the Catholic Church spark demands for the cutting of ties with Rome? No. Should a racial lens be applied when the next Ian Huntley, or Sidney Cook, or Rose West, or any other white criminal is convicted of child murder? Of course not. That is why every elected politician had a patriotic responsibility to state publicly that the Southport murders were not about race, nor immigration status, nor asylum rights, nor integration. 3 children are dead. Hundreds of lives have been shattered because of the criminal actions of a teenaged killer who is black. But Badenoch, careful of her GB News audience, was more interested in political strategy than home truths. John Grace, The Guardian's acerbic columnist, who was deployed by his newspaper as a Badenoch attack dog, accused the Tory leader of combining arrogance, laziness, and delusion in an article describing her performance at Prime Minister's questions. Any more of the irresponsible politics peddled by Badenoch this week, and this Guardian viewpoint will begin to take hold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This helps us to keep going and to reach more people with these updates on Kemi Badenoch's leadership of the Conservative Party and the challenges she faces. See you next time.